Yesterday, we started off with the decade of action, with only 10 years remaining for the 2030 agenda to be implemented. And our ambition yesterday was to move from a sense of urgency into delivery by adopting system thinking, normative dialogue, by broadening the space of actors that are invited in to act and to be not only to act on themselves, but to actually have influence in our joint effort to save our planet. And we also talked about some of the drivers for biodiversity loss, climate change, and how we can effectively turn the development around. Today, the theme of today is imagining a world in balance. And today we are going to move into the how question. So if we are to embrace a broader approach of actors, including faith actors, indigenous groups, and moral duty bearers, if they are invited in, and if we start to imagine what impact that will have for our planet, what new approaches can be brought to our climate justice work and to our environmental work? Often, when we address development, we think in strict economic terms, or in terms of GDP, or in materialistic terms. But if we are to transform and to have a discursive turn, then we want, of course, to bring in social capital, cultural capital, and spiritual capital. And in this very turn and broadening, it is crucial to hear from faith actors themselves how they envision this world. So now I have the great honor to introduce our keynote for today, Reverend Kenneth Mtata, who is based in Zimbabwe and is acting as the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Christian Council. He has a background as a prominent scholar with a PhD from KwaZulu-Natal University in South Africa. He has studied and presented and produced research on the religion and development nexus. So he's a global leading expert in that sense. But apart from being a prominent scholar, he has done the work on the ground, living and leading communities from the family level to the national level in Zimbabwe. So with these words, I would like to welcome you, Kenneth, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Josephine. I hope I am connected now.
We hear you perfectly well.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate being invited to be part of this very important and timely conversation. It is not possible for us to enter into this conversation without thinking about the situation we find ourselves in right now with the pandemic of the coronavirus and how it is disrupting the way we have been moving forward as the most dominant species on Earth. It reminded me a very interesting paragraph that I recently read from the book of Yuval Noah Harari. His book entitled Homo Deus, where he gives a brief history of tomorrow. And he says that with regard to other animals, humans have long since become gods. We don't like to reflect on this too deeply because we have not been particularly just or merciful gods. I think this is an interesting opening to my brief remarks here, that as we look at ourselves as human beings in the world, I think it is fair to say that we have long assumed ourselves to be gods. I know that I am using this religious terminology in a world where secular thinking does not accommodate very much such language. But the self-understanding of human beings in a hierarchical structure in which they are at the top, or in a secular arrangement in which they are at the center, I think is something that we should first come to terms with if we are going to live in a balanced world. Actually, in my reflections, I just want maybe to highlight three things that will need to be changed if we are going to make a meaningful contribution towards a balanced world. First, we will need to change the way we think about ourselves as human beings. Secondly, we will need to change the current structures of society. And third, we will need to change our habits and practices. And I think if we are going to change the way we think, we construe what it means to be human, I think one of the changes that will need to take place is to dethrone ourselves as gods. And therefore, we need to remove ourselves from the center, the idolatry in which we are participating in, where we think that the whole universe must only serve the appetites and desires of human beings. Now, we know that the desires and wants and needs and interests of human beings are possible to distinguish. And we unfortunately have turned upside down the hierarchy of these needs, interests, and wants. And the current dominant way of arranging the things that we desire has been to put the things that we desire and want even beyond the things that we need. For this reason, the way we participate in the economy is not driven first by the needs. That is our need for food, our need for accommodation, our need for relationships, our need for love. But it has tended now to be driven by the things that we enjoy and the things that give us instant gratification and fulfillment. Unfortunately, if we turn these priorities upside down, our priority only for enjoyment and entertainment tend to make us view ourselves only as consumers and therefore not as neighbors. Because if our existence is only to enjoy instant gratification, we view all creation as objects that must be enjoyed, that must be turned into entertainment and pleasure only for human beings. The problem is that if we follow that line of being, we will not only want to enjoy and objectify all creation, but we will also want to do that to other human beings that we dominate. And that will create an unbalanced world where other human beings can be viewed as objects for entertainment. So the first thing that has to change, the first conversion, I'm glad to be using religious language here. Yes. The first level of conversion that is required is the conversion where we dethrone human beings from being gods, but human beings become neighbors. They become neighbors with one another, and they become neighbors with the rest of creation. But in order to aid this conversion, they may also be need to put policies, to put rules, to put regulations, and to put structures that control the insatiable appetite for human beings to exercise this desire for being gods. In other words, human beings on their own do not have the capacity for self-restraint. Human beings on their own do not have the capacity to control their desire for consumption. We can see this from the way, for example, we consume food. We are getting statistics that every day about 8,000 children die from hunger. But we also hear that thousands and thousands of tons of food is thrown away from fast food shops, from restaurants, and from many other parts of the world where there is so much abundance of food, but there is not enough human beings to consume that food. You know, this is happening at a time when we have so much increased our capacity for logistics and for international distribution of goods. Companies like Amazon and many other such logistics companies have perfected their ways of distribution. But the reason why this food cannot be distributed to the areas where it is needed is because this distribution is not supported by the logic of profit. In other words, where there cannot be direct connection to profits, the natural preference will be to destroy such food. But if we are going to dethrone human beings as gods who are only driven by a desire for enjoyment and for profits, and we set up structures that meet the basic needs of all human beings, there is a possibility that actually we can turn the current efficiencies we have to meet all human needs. We have seen, for example, that many of these companies that have developed efficiencies in logistics have actually now moved from distribution to entertainment industry, because they can see that they can translate their efficiencies to entertainment. So we may need to introduce structures, policies that enable us to change our greed into service of need. And we think that it is possible if we change our policies. But last but not least is that we do not only need a conversion from being gods to be neighbors. We do not only need to have to change our structures of greed into structures of service to the neighbor. We will also need to change our habits and our practices. This will require that we change our desires and our habits of consumption, so that we are not only consuming under the influence only of enjoyment, but also to eat, consume in the understanding that we need to do so in a sustainable way. And I think this sustainable oriented form of consumption is a new habit that we will need to develop at a personal level, at a household level, at community level, at national level, but also at international levels. These habits, of course, others have already started by changing the types of food they eat. Others have changed by the quality of food they eat. But above everything, what it really requires is to bring in some habits that are no longer familiar to us, especially those who are living in secularized environments. This is where we may want to draw from our spiritual capital, from some of our ancient traditions. These ancient traditions have taught us that it is possible to deny ourselves certain pleasures. The habits we have from traditions, religious traditions, habits like fasting. If you are talking to some Christian traditions today, in this season of Lent, when they remember that human beings suffer, human beings will die, they also understand that human beings may need to deny themselves certain pleasures so that they bring back the created order into some equilibrium. And these habits of fasting and self-denial may require that we think very seriously about how we reduce consumption of power, electric power, by switching off the gadgets that we do not need to use, by changing the habits of how much meat we eat and replace it with other protein sources, and how much we change the way we travel so that we can have meetings like this one we are having right now. And this change of habits can be viewed from just personal habits, personal change of habits. But if we are going to bring back equilibrium and balance to creation, it must be viewed from the perspective of sustainability, of our own sustainability and the sustainability of creation. My contribution to this important conversation, Josephine and the whole audience, is that I am saying right now the world is not balanced because human beings have put themselves as gods above everyone else. And there is need for a conversion where human beings see themselves as neighbors. And this happens at a personal level, but it will need to be inculcated to the whole human race, and there is need for campaigns to change, to dethrone human beings from this high pedestal. The second thing is we will need supportive institutions, policies, and ways of structuring society so that we aid this new conversion. And third, there will be need to develop new habits. And these habits, I have given an example in which we can draw from different religious traditions that can support this new way of life. This is my initial input, but I realize that we are going to be having more input from other participants. And I believe that from these conversations, we can build a movement among citizens of the world who desire to contribute to a balanced world. I bring back to you, Josephine, and the moderators.
Thank you. Woo! Thank you so much, Kenneth. And your words will have a strong influence on all of us who are part of People and Planet. but it will also impact more people around the globe, because this is live streamed on YouTube, and we can share and spread this link around the globe. So your words will reach the public, the households, and the citizens of the world. I have a follow-up question for you, Kenneth. You are currently on the ground in Zimbabwe. You are the leader of the Christian Council in Zimbabwe. So we would like to hear briefly from the ground, how are faith actors and churches specifically in Zimbabwe responding to the climate crisis, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the pandemic? And how are you as the center leader acting and responding?
Thank you, Josephine. You know, for one of the issues that we will need to realize is that even though the global south is not the main contributor to the pollution of the oceans, the pollution of the climate, of the environment, even though the contribution we are making to destroying the environment is proportionally quite low to the developed world, we are suffering the greater brunt of the climate change and the environmental crisis the world is currently facing. I think you'll be aware that recently we were dealing with the cyclone Yaari, which saw many people lose their homes, their livelihoods, and until now we still have thousands of families that are still to be accommodated and who are staying in very uncomfortable makeshift homes. In a situation like this, you know, the coming of the corona pandemic is quite scary. Of course, what compounds the situation for us in our particular situation here in Zimbabwe is that the health system is dysfunctional, and therefore you do not have policies in place that will make sure that service delivery will cushion the pain of the people in the face of such uncertainties. And that's why faith communities are playing a very important role in making sure that communities are climate change resilient. Like right now, we have been working with communities in the rural areas so that they change their agriculture habits. You know, many of them have been used to regular rainfall patterns, but all this has changed now due to climate change. And because of that, there is so much high levels of food insecurity in this part of the world. And to try and mitigate this, we have been introducing what we call farming God's way. Farming God's way is to try and use the natural ways of conservation farming, in which people use the natural ingredients to maximize their productivity. This is to try and minimize the use of artificial fertilizers and try to make sure that the earth is able to replenish itself, and making sure that we use natural material that decomposes to keep moisture and to increase productivity. This is one intervention that we are making. We are also trying to enable people to use indigenous crops and small grain crops which are resistant to drought and which can help families to increase their yield. But on the other hand, we are also pushing on policy changes so that the government is responsive to the reality of climate change. You know that we had a sad statement yesterday from one of our government ministers who said that coronavirus is a punishment to the developed world because of the sanctions that they have put on our country. And we issued a statement to reject that and other myths that are related to this kind of thinking. And because there are people who may end up thinking that climate change is a punishment for sins, and forget that climate change and many other hazards that are coming as a result of pollution of the earth are actually a result of human a lack of responsibility among human habits. And therefore, we have to change this thinking as well as changing our practices. Josephine.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. We will take good use of your wisdom and your input when we will now broaden the conversation to include a number of other prominent speakers and contributors in the panel. But thank you so much, Kenneth, and we will keep you in the global dialogue, so you are with us, but we will now broaden it to include other contributors. So thank you so much, Kenneth, and can we please give him a round of applause from around the globe? Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And now, yes, indeed, we are joining up with new contributors. And some of them, two of them will be joining us here, and two of them will be joining us digitally. Elizabeth and Abdel Rahman from Sultan from Jordan, Ecopeace. And yes, I'll join you in the sofa, but I will, yes, I will.
So we are talking about a world in balance and how we can work towards that. So as I said initially, we want to try out and move towards holistic approaches, which goes beyond a materialistic and economic thinking. And there we have lots of other capital to explore beyond the financial capital. And some of them are spiritual capital, social capital, cultural capital. So with us in this panel, we have 4 prominent contributors. And the first one, I'll get a chance for you to briefly introduce yourself, Jonna. You are working for Islamic Relief Sweden as a climate and environmental policy officer. And I'll get the chance for you to briefly introduce yourself. Yeah?
While I get some water for us.
Yeah. Yes, you will have a hand mic, which is there.
Excellent.
Hello?
So maybe you can just let us know a little bit about your everyday reality within Islamic Relief.
Yes, so as Josephine said, my name is Jonna, and I'm working at Islamic Relief, and I work thematically with environment and climate there, both at a project level to mainstream those thematic areas into our project, but also a little bit on policy and more strategic work on that. And I don't know if all of you know about Islamic Relief, but it's an international NGO. We have our headquarters in Birmingham in England. And we work with humanitarian and development projects in about 40 countries. So that's me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And our second panelist will come up on the screen. It's Elizabeth from Stockholm International Water Institute, Elizabeth Yaari. And the floor is yours to give a brief introduction of yourself.
Okay, how's the sound in the room?
It's perfect.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Of course, I want to thank everybody. It's really exciting to be back here all today, complete lockdown where I am today. So please excuse if there's a distraction, children in the background. We're trying to keep them at bay. My name is Elizabeth from the Stockholm International Water Institute, and I'm a senior manager for the Transboundary Water Cooperation Department at SIWI. And I also engage with this water and faith space through our Swedish Waterhouse cluster group on water and faith. I think just to kind of frame my entry point, from the Transboundary Water Cooperation perspective, our process is really about understanding the diverse priorities and needs of different stakeholder groups and very much leveraging that approach around the water and faith intersect so that we understand the different needs and priorities of communities so that we can take this joint action that we're all looking for together.
And where are you currently based now, Elizabeth?
Today I'm in Tel Aviv, where I got stuck in the global situation. So yeah, it's exciting to be part of this important discussion here today.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have Paula Grossman with us in our studio here in our Learning Hub in Sweden. And you are representing the Jewish congregation of Stockholm. Can you tell us a little bit of your background and your entry point to the nexus of faith and environment?
Okay, I'm very honored to be here. I'm just an individual. I'm not employed by the Jewish congregation, but I am very engaged in environmental questions, and I'm also a traditional Jewish person. So I seek to find my strength in my Jewish religion, to work as much as I can for the environment. So I have engaged in different venues and activities.
And you also work as a teacher.
Yes, I'm a teacher, but not in environment or biology. I'm a language teacher.
Wow. Thank you so much, Paula. And then we have our last contributor to the panel, Abdel Rahman Sultan from Ecopeace in Amman.
Yes, good morning, and thanks very much for inviting me to this panel. I'm very happy. We're sorry that we're supposed to have a big hub here in Jordan, but because of the circumstances in Jordan, it's not possible today. So I'm trying to be the only Jordanian. Actually, there's maybe one or two more joining this global session. So I'm very happy. I work at Ecopeace Middle East. I am an environmental engineer, and we're coming from a practical background where we would like to save the Jordan River that is shared between Palestine, Jordan, and Israel, between three different people. So we're coming a little bit, our focus is to build harmony between people and nature, creating peace, and faith is one of those overarching issues that we are addressing the environment with.
Thank you so much. So we will move back to you, Elizabeth. Are you still with us?
Of course.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So you have pushed globally a discursive change around SDG 6, which we have here actually. Clean water and sanitation, the right to water. And you have pushed for a discursive global change to incorporate more of social and cultural and spiritual dimension in how we are valuing water. So I would like to address a question to you specifically to ask, what's the background, what's the reason for that effort and work, and what do you see, I mean, in terms of when you try to change a discourse, you have to work at so many levels: individual level, household, community, policy level, government level, UN level. So how are you approaching change in this sense? And how are you taking this effort further?
Okay. Thanks, Josephine. So yesterday in the twinning discussion, together with Aman and Pretoria, we had a little bit of time to delve into the reason why SDG 6 is so important to the entire Sustainable Development Agenda. And it sounds like in Sweden, you also had a focus on SDG 6, which is really great. I think it's important to say that in the past, the water sector has developed a really robust literature around the economic valuation of water, with less focus around the culture, spiritual valuations of water. So we really saw it as a deficit that needed to be addressed. And the reason why this is so important, of course, is what many of the speakers have already remarked upon, and that is that we require this all hands on deck approach in order to meet SDG 6 critical in the short time period that we have. And to do that, you really have to meet people where they are. And so understanding the different types of valuation of water is really part of meeting people where they are. And the idea, of course, is to make water champions out of all of us in this effort. So we find what is important to us and where those priorities overlap. So we engage in a process of cluster group discussions, which are really a dialogue process about enhancing participation and partnership towards a shared goal around SDG 6. Our water and faith cluster group, I think, is a really good example of this, and the conversation has really evolved. I think it's worth noting the different stages that we've gone to as we've reached out to different communities and worked to elevate these faith-based and spiritual and indigenous perspectives around the water sector decision-making processes. Initially, in 2016, when we first started this process, there was, I would say, I mean, it's already a few years ago, but already there was the sense of why are we doing this? What added value is this happening? We bring all these faith-based decision makers to the discussion around water resource management. And there was when we first launched the effort, there was like a dissidence about it, like why are we doing this? But that very much evolved into how we can do this better. And initially I felt that it was a little bit of an instrumental approach, meaning I felt from the water sector side of the discussion that they were saying, how can we better utilize faith-based networks and partnerships in order to get our messages across? And again, that was part of the evolution. And now I see much more of a two-way learning process where we work to understand the shared interests and needs across the community generally. And through that long dialogue process in which we engage each other, really seek to understand where is our neighbor, how they enter the water discussion, what are the different priorities and needs of different parts of the stakeholder communities and the diverse faith-based communities that we have at the table now, that it's really more about creating a common issue agenda. And that's the issue agenda, I think, is really essential in order to create that joint action. In 2016, when we first had a water and faith event at the Stockholm World Water Week, we had a speaker with us, Cardinal Turkson, who reminded us at that time that we are not going to have an interfaith dialogue around water in Stockholm at the World Water Week. That's not the goal. The goal is really, what do we have in common? What are the shared priorities, and how we can take joint action together for this? And I think the conversation has really evolved to a point where we all, I think the sense in the room here as well is very urgency of action. Likewise, in our dialogue around water and faith, there's really this now move from agenda to action.
Okay, Elizabeth, I have a follow-up question for you. As Stockholm International Water Institute, SIWI, you are a secular actor working with innovative approaches towards faith and interfaith partnerships. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reactions you have come across when you have pushed for this approach, but being in fact a secular actor yourself.
Yeah, and I think this is this evolution of discussion that we have gone from this sense of why is a secular organization like SIWI trying to reach out and engage faith-based communities. That conversation, I think, is really completed, finished in a sense that that's no longer the question. The question is how we can better partner together. And one of the principles of inclusive governance is to get everybody to the table, to get all the voices around the table so that we can create this common issue agenda that lends itself to joint action. So while there was some kind of why a secular organization is working to have this like multi-faith, interfaith dialogue around water at the beginning, now I feel like that's no longer where we are at in the conversation. Now we are at a place where we understand we need inclusive participation as part of water governance in order to take these joint actions that are so urgently needed to achieve the SDG 6 and the full SDG agenda.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. And I want to bring it down to also bring it further also to the personal level. And Paula, I'd like to ask you from your experience, as you mentioned, you know, you are an individual and acting in the as a community member, as a teacher, as a writer of educational materials, and inspiring also people with your teachings to a healthy lifestyle and healthy relationship with the environment, and also, as I understand it, with food. How can your perspective of bringing traditions and teachings in together with consciousness around environmental impact be inspirational for perhaps behavioral changes on an individual level and perhaps a community level in our daily lives? Sorry.
Thank you. I was very pleased to listen to Kenneth before. Some of these thoughts have rolled around in my head also, especially these days, of course. And I really have the feeling that we are forced, this is a signal, a warning, that we are forced to go back to our human side, as Kenneth said, and that we essentially are creatures as all other creatures on this planet, and what we need is water to live, water and food and shelter, and he also added love, of course. And he also mentioned the thing about we need to change our way of thought. If we don't transform our thinking, we cannot go so far. So, and the thinking will come out of our spirituality. And if we go back to each one of us goes back to our faith, or if it is religion or other kind of faith, we can draw strength from that. And each person has his own or her own capacities. So each person will find from her abilities to do the best out of these thoughts in when you want to change. So I think each person can do a lot of things, and each person can contribute. And my thing is I'm very much into food, so I like to cook, and this has been lately my way to contribute. So I have become a vegan, of course, and I act according to my Jewish principles also, my Jewish principles of that are common to many faiths. And I also want to inspire other people to eat less meat or stop eating meat. That's one of the things I'm doing. And then I try the best to do different things that I can.
Fantastic, and I really like that linkage to the context that Kenneth talked about as well. And I love food also, and I think we probably share that, a lot of us. What would you say that what are the possibilities? I mean, we have so many images or kind of inspirations of like breaking bread, like all those symbolic acts that include food. What would you say, like from a Jewish tradition or from your inspiration with food right now, what are the potentials of using food as a force of change?
Well, everyone needs food. So we go back to basics, you know, when we see a crisis like this, people are going to the stores and hamstering food. And it's so essential. And when you think also about, you know, how much food do I need, you start thinking, you know, to be a good neighbor, as Kenneth said, and how much food do I actually need myself? Will I be, you think, you know, in Sweden now, okay, if things worsen, will I be prepared to take from my food at home that I have to give to my neighbor? So we each have to go back to ourselves, to our individual level. I don't know if I answered your question.
I like that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
we will now. You can hand it over to Jonna. So Jonna, you, as you told us earlier in the panel, you are working with Islamic relief and within specifically environment and climate. And I would like to elaborate on the how. So how do you effectively use faith as a principle and faith leaders within global Islam and faith writings and teachings and Holy Scripture and the Quran to mobilize and to push for change and to also come across, I mean, attitude and behavioral change? Could you elaborate on that how? Because we all want to dig into and see how you approach this.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try. So I think that we work, because we work both at an organizational level, right? So we are an organization working in humanitarian aid, and we really see how climate change is affecting and driving humanitarian needs. So we have a climate change policy, which was launched in 2019, and in that policy, there are lots of examples from writing, Islamic writings, from the Quran, Islamic principles that are used to sort of motivate and strengthen the message of the urgency and the responsibility that we have to work with climate change. And I think that is maybe a strength that value-based organizations have, because working in the organization, you're already agreed on these core values. And if you use them and just translate them and apply them to, in this case, the issue of climate change, it's really easy for all of us to understand it and to sort of, also apply that to our work. So that is one example, I think, of how it can be used to sort of strengthen and motivate a standpoint that an organization have. And we also try to do it in Sweden, because I was thinking about it when we talk about consumption and how we live, and these are some examples of what is also written in this policy, that Islam, for example, but I'm sure other religions as well, are sort of a power that are trying to raise other values that are not materialistic, but maybe more important values that we need to focus more on. And we here in Sweden and in other parts of other countries in this part of the world really have to work on our consumption, and we have to change our behavior the most, I would say, to reach all of these goals. So we also worked a little bit with imams here in Sweden, so that they can, in their, like maybe during Friday prayers, talk about climate and have that as a theme. So, because we also have to do our job here at home, right? Yeah.
And that is actually a movement that I've read about currently in global Islam, is to green the mosques, to think about how to use energy more efficiently and in a more sustainable way, and to use this is not only within, of course, global Islam, but in many faith movements around the globe. Now you shared very, like, in a positive sense, saying that you see this mobilization happening and you are working with local imams and you have a great policy. By the way, the Islamic, the policy on environment from Islamic Relief will be posted, or is already posted, on the Padlets, if you want to look at it, all of you around the globe. But what I want to ask you is also, what are some of the challenges for you? I mean, of course, we understand that lots of good change is happening, but what are some of the challenges you have to tackle along the way?
Well, I don't know if you mean here in Sweden or if you mean like about in our projects, but I can take one example from Pakistan, because I talked to them on Friday when I knew I was going to be here, and they are working with advocacy on climate change and using religious leaders there. And we talked about all the positive things that have been mentioned by many others, that, you know, they are mobilizers and they have a big audience and they speak with a language that the communities are familiar with, and that so that they can really receive the message. But they also said that there is a challenge, because working with religious leaders, you have to have trust from them. Like, they have to trust the organization, right? And you have to find these common issues that that the previous speaker was also talking about. And I think that's a challenge. So it's not only to say, like, yeah, we're going to work with religious leaders now, and then you go and do it. But you have to build a common stand on issues and a common, you have to trust each other and to have, meet each other, I think, before you can start working. So I think that's one challenge, and it's important to keep in mind.
And I think this nicely connects your input with Elizabeth when she said we have to also be careful so we're not becoming too instrumental in trying just to utilize or take use of faith leaders, but actually to enter a more of a holistic understanding and embracing a faith language rather than just instrumentally take use of faith leaders. So thank you for that.
Excellent. And I also want to pass sort of that question or that comment on to a question to Abed. I'm wondering, although the really hard and concerted work that you are doing in Ecopeace Middle East, how can you tell us a little bit about how faith within environmental activism can constitute a platform for reconciling and deepening the commitments and action for the right for a healthy environment for all?
Thank you very much. Actually, can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Excellent. So we at Ecopeace, we're working together as Jordanian, Palestinian, Israelis, that we have conflict here. some of us within the country, we have either Muslim or Christian or Jews in the same country, and we have this deep lateral divide between the different ethnic groups or the different religion. So the basic issue that we wanted to do is to create trust between the different people in order to be able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. We looked at how can we bring Palestinian, Israelis, and Jordanian together, but we also looked how can we bring the different society elements, and in this case, Muslim, Christian, and Jews, to think about the ecosystem together. So we hold a number of meetings where Muslims and Christian and Jews spoke about the importance of saving the ecosystems from their own religion. And that was an eye-opening to see that we share so much in terms of religion. Now, when we understand that three religions are actually driving us towards the same objective, but what is the problem? Why we're not doing that? So we need to depoliticize the environmental protection and go back to the basic religion request from people to be clean and neat and protecting their water and environment. And this is where we started to emphasize on people working in the religion domain, being imam, rabbis, or priests, to say, okay, how can we create a momentum within our society to protect our nature, not only alone, but together with the others. So we created a number of toolkits that helped everyone to look at environment from his own perspective. In doing so, we were able to bring more trust to the system, that we live here together. And today we suffer from climate change, we suffer from water shortage, we suffer from corona together. And it does not differentiate between which person, which nationality, and which religion. So we are all in the same boat, and it's a rough sea. That's why it's very important to see how can we all together create bondages and to understand where the connection can be made, especially on the bringing religion toward saving the environment. As you mentioned in your question to Elizabeth about atheist groups trying to save the environment, and or a secular group trying to save the environment. They also have a core value that we should all live in a healthy environment, healthy habitat. So basically, as a human being, whether we are religious or not religious, we all share the same core values of being helpful and being proactive towards our nature.
Excellent! Wow, thank you. And it's truly inspiring to follow your examples from the action, the on the ground projects that are happening, that are both driving a positive environmental impact, and as well as an interfaith collaboration in practice. So that's a true inspiration.
Yes, and now we would like for all the four of you to give some sort of summarized short concluding thoughts, and as panelists, and there we encourage the four of you to pick up something that insights you gained from other panelists, and you can also, as we already have heard, reflect also back to our keynote, Kenneth and Mtata, but we will mostly in this concluding round focus around your contributions in the panel. So give us a short final remark quickly, and tell us of new angles and thoughts that you have gained from the conversation. And we will start with Elizabeth from Stockholm International Water Institute.
Great. Wow, so inspiring to hear from all of the other panelists. Thank you. I think it's really a challenge on us to move from awareness about our different perspectives to a consultation with each other, to really a space where we're making decisions together. And that's a process that requires dialogue and consultation, and it can take time. So yeah, but I think it's a worthy endeavor to move towards a much deeper participation and partnership. I think in the water sector, we should all be aware that this is really going to take center stage next year when the water community will focus on valuing water for the World Water Development for the World Water Week, the World Water Day. This is a discussion that's inviting a lot of contributions from faith-based communities, indigenous perspectives, and many others to share and understand this value in water. So I think the people in this room are a huge asset to this conversation. So I look forward to learning more. It's not easy to think about, we're used to, it's even easier for us to think about the economic valuation of water because we can put some numbers to it. We can do quantitative assessment. This requires cultural, spiritual, capital valuation. It requires us to move beyond that, to take into consideration a lot of different, discussion-based valuation. And it's a challenge for all of us, but it's a worthy endeavor. And I think we have so much to learn from the climate action and the climate change process, who have long been engaged with faith-based partnerships and working to make sure that indigenous perspectives are very prominent in those kind of dialogues. So I think we have a lot to learn from that. We don't have to start over, rather we can expand that partnership to really include the entire SDG agenda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And we'll move on back to Paula.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with Elizabeth, and I think this to find common grounds is very important, to see that each of us, even though we don't agree on everything, we have things in common and we can act commonly. Like, for instance, Ecopeace, and just as an example of the work of Ecopeace, of a common ground, is the Jordan River. So one of the projects of Ecopeace is, for instance, to have Christians and Muslims and Jews act together to cleanse and to restore the Jordan River, and to find these targets that you can do together that will also build respect and understanding among us. And I'm thinking here in Sweden too. I mean, we almost lost our indigenous minority, the Sami people, but we need to take from them, for instance, how we act towards our northern part of the country, how we act towards nature.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, let's take Jonna here as well.
Okay, well, that's exactly what I wanted to say as well. That it's really inspiring to see examples of how interfaith collaboration and relationships can be built when working on a thematic issue like clean water or climate, and that these collaborations also have an added value in themselves, that we build relations between different religions and such. So I was really inspired by that, by Ecopeace and by what SIWI is doing as well.
Thank you. And Abed, your reflections from your perspective on the what's been said in the panel.
I think I have two main buzzwords. One is solidarity, that we should all again work together and unite. And this is something that, despite where we're coming from, actually I learned that the faith groups, actually they have lots of faith, and we need to learn from them. That this is something that keeps us going forward. Sometimes we lose faith on the way, and this is something that we need to keep ourselves. The second thing, which is responsibility, and seeing different small actions, like how we behave, how we eat, how we change our behavior, can make all that big difference for the globe. And this is something that we should emphasize, that we should enjoy eating, and we enjoy living and enjoy our life, and with positive vibes. So we need to think again, how can we make this nexus as a full engagement between the classical mainstream environmentalism, and also with the people people's beliefs and feelings and so on.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all panelists. If you, as a participant in the People and Planet, have specific questions to the contributors in the panel, you can write them on the Zoom chat and submit them. And for those of who are, for example, in the Swedish Learning Hub, you can also do so. And then you will be directly connected to the panelists who are remaining in the global Zoom meeting. Now it is soon, not Zoom, but soon, time for our exciting global open space. We have postponed it 15 minutes, so it's going to start 10:45 instead of 10:30 Swedish time, ETC, Europe Central Time. So it's now 20 minutes left until it will start, and we will have 8 parallel sessions that will take place at the same time around the globe, and each of the 8 sessions have a unique Zoom meeting address and a specific facilitator for each session. So what's important for everyone around the globe is to realize that once we close up now, you close down the global Zoom meeting and you re-enter at 10:45.
And
the specified Zoom meeting for each of the open spaces.
Well, actually, what we're doing is, and if I can have the PowerPoint shared there as well. What we're doing is that everybody who's joining digitally and everybody in this conference can you visit the Padlet page that's called Sida SPF/OpenSpace, and we will send that link out in the chat as well, so that you can click it directly and view what the different sessions are. There are 8 different topics that are being hosted. And first of all, we have some information. So I'm just going to take that quickly. What we're proposing is that we kind of combine, taking our leg stretch and a cup of tea or coffee or water along with us into our digital open space. So everybody who will be hosts for the open space will start connecting to their specific Zoom meeting link shortly, so that they're ready to be gathered by participants at around 10:45. And those who are assembling in here, and also for you at home, take some time between now and then to just go through the sessions that you want to attend, and then to click into that specific link. That is going to enable you to come into a new room. And in that room, you will be joined by the host for that specific session. The way that open space works is, for those of you who've done it in real life, or for those of you who've never heard of it, is that there's a few guiding principles. One of the primary ones that I like to always get to is, we in our world of effectiveness and getting things right, we want to control things a lot, oftentimes. Here in open space technology, in this methodology, we say that whoever shows up is the right people. So the people who, it may be we have 8 sessions. We're not seeking an even divide among all the sessions. If everyone wants to join one session, then that's the right people. That's that's the right group. And there's another principle that says whatever happens is exactly what was supposed to. So if that does happen, that everyone joins into one meeting, then maybe there's a reason for that, for particular types of conversations to be had. So we're not we're not seeking a particular division between sessions or a particular outcome for the session. The discussion happens as it should, and what we do encourage is that there is interaction and that participants as well as hosts are respectful to each other and utilize the fantastic tool of listening, because you might find out something new from someone else, and also step up to speak if you feel moved to speak. But share the space with others.
And we have two more things in terms of guiding principles, is that we should all use a headset or headphones with mic when you speak, from your respective device. If it's whatever, iPad, phone, smartphone, but make sure you put on your headphones, each of you around the globe, because that will give us the best quality of sound and voices. And also I wanted to say, for those of you who are currently in Sarajevo and you need translation, we have created a translation for one of the 8 sessions. So
that is the session led by Danja Bergman, and let's see, Andrew, do you know which session number that has? I believe that it might be number 1. Yes. So Danja Bergman will be hosting session number 1, and that will be...
faith and biodiversity.
And that'll be
so
translated.
We recommend for Sarajevo, if you need translation, join session 1, faith and biodiversity. And for the rest of you around the globe, you're free to choose the one you prefer. And here in the Swedish Learning Hub, we offer some coffee now before you move to your space for open session. I hope and wish for all the rest of you in learning hubs and at home that you can grab a mug of coffee or tea or water or something else, and then we reassembly, but in specific open space sessions at 10:45.
And after that is in exactly 1 hour. In exactly 1 hour, we should be gathering back into the Zoom link for the global session, because that's when we're going to hear from the other open space sessions what was discussed in theirs.
Yeah, so once your open space session is ready, come back to the global meeting in Zoom. Okay.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.